Good evening. It is Thursday night at 11 p.m. A little bit of a change, but that can only mean two things, two good things as well. That is, we are closer to Friday than usual, and we have a very, very special guest. Can't even speak. Very special guest joining us. I can't speak because I am fanboying a bit, but like Locked on Colts has been my first listen of the day. Not recently, it's been Locked on Pacers, but Locked on Colts is usually my first listen of the day. So joining us is a very special guest, Zach Hicks. Welcome, mate.
Welcome in, Zach. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, guys. I might be making you guys stay up a little late here to have me on, but I appreciate you guys having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I'll get straight into it. Like I say, you are a big part of Jake on Locked On. You do lots of writing, You're the film nerd, right? You're the draft nerd. Everyone comes to you. These two guys on my right, they love the draft. They know a lot more than me. But do you just want to give yourself an introduction to people, people our side of the pond who might not be down that road or down the rabbit hole yet of being such a Colts fan?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome always hearing about Colts fans across the world, more than just being in Indiana. I mean, I'm not an Indiana native, actually. I'm out in Virginia, so a little bit across the country out here in the United States. But it's always great to hear Colts fans across across the world, man. I mean, this is a growing sport that's growing to so many different areas of everything. I mean, the Colts have that partnership with like Germany right now, and a lot of players on the team from Germany or Austria is where Bernhard Ryman's from. So yeah, if you guys aren't familiar with me, I am the co-host of Locked On Colts alongside Jake Arthur. Before, like, I kind of made my name in the Colts media circuit with SB Nation through Stampede Blue. And then that grew to Sports Illustrated. I made the jump to Sports Illustrated about 2 years ago with Jake Arthur. So obviously that relationship has done a lot for me. And yeah, that's where I've been the past couple of years. A lot of film stuff, a lot of draft stuff. Drafting, like basically the NFL draft is where I started in this industry back in 2016, 2017, and then slowly picked up with the Colts in 2018. So that's always been my bread and butter. And then it became more team coverage stuff. And yeah, I've been told I'm just the film nerd that people go to in Indianapolis. And I kind of grabbed that niche back in 2018, and it's kind of become my brand. And I run with it, baby. I love the film nerd moniker, and I'm happy to take it because that's basically the definition of what I am right there.
So before I throw it to Ed and Nate for some questions, my sort of first and opening question is, this side of, like, the European side of football fans is, we might have a different perspective to you guys over there. What, with the new era in Indianapolis, obviously the passing of, I'm going to call it Sir Jim Irsay, and the taking over of Carly Irsay Gordon's going to be head of football operations. What is the vibe on the ground? Is Chris Ballard safe regardless at the end of this year? Is he gone? What's the vibe?
I think a lot of it will come down to just what transpires on the field this season. If we see much of the same that we've seen the last couple of years from the Indianapolis Colts, my kind of read on the situation is Carly's not like Jim in the sense where she's overly sentimental. We love Jim. Jim's great. He was fantastic in the community, and he did a lot of great things for this city and brought a championship to this city 20 years ago. So you can never say a bad thing about Jim Irsay, but he did get a little too sentimental, especially in this Chris Ballard era where he kind of trusted the past of, like, I kept Polian for a long time, I have to keep Chris Ballard for a long time. The rest of the league likes Chris Ballard, so I have to like Chris Ballard. I don't get the sense that Carly Irsay is going to be like that. I think she is a lot more business minded, and that can be a good little shakeup to a team that's run like a small business in the sense where they treat everyone like a family rather than like employees at a business. So I think Carly is going to be quick in the offseason to pull the trigger if something's not working. Now, if they come out this year and they win 10 games, make the playoffs, and look like a team that can build going forward, I think she'd be more than happy to keep Chris Ballard and more than happy to keep Shane Steichen. But it really does come down to the results on the field this year, more so than ever than it did under Jim Irsay. I actually was speculating early on this offseason that, hey, maybe Carly would keep them one more year because she wants to maybe get her feet wet a little bit, like just kind of get everything going and then maybe reevaluate at maybe in like 2026 or something like that. But the sense we're kind of getting here in Indy is like, she's not really playing, and it's not that she's going to go around firing everybody just to fire everybody. But if the results aren't there, I think she's going to pull the trigger and make some moves. And it's been a long time with Chris Ballard, and very few results have been positive. So I think it wouldn't be the wrong decision if the Colts miss out on the playoffs this year.
Ed, Nathan, any questions for Zach?
Yeah, I'll start. Zach, Harrison's definitely not the only fanboy around here. I was even nervous before we went live. Honestly, I've listened to your content for years. I've read your content for years, man. Got a lot of love for you, and thank you for joining us.
Of course.
We've been debating the Richardson versus Jones battle, which is, encapsulating every single Colts fan in the world, really. We're of the opinion that if Danny Dimes takes us to the playoffs and gets a $200 million contract, that's probably one of the worst things that could happen to the Colts. Do you agree? Are you in that camp?
It's always the big brain aspect of like being a football fan, where it's like success can sometimes, like 1 year success can lead to disaster in the future, because on paper you would say like making the playoffs is a good thing. Like, it's a good thing. Let's make the playoffs, get everyone that playoff experience, get these veterans believing in this system. But as you said, Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones is just not a franchise quarterback, or he's most likely not a franchise quarterback. There is a scenario where he comes in here, starts all 17 games, leads into the playoffs, and has this Alex Smith, Baker Mayfield type of resurgence. And that's not the worst thing in the world. If you can have like a top 15 quarterback, that'd be great. But realistically speaking here, I don't think that's what he's going to be. He might just be like a slightly better version of Joe Flacco last year, or, just a more consistent version of Anthony Richardson, like someone who can stay on the football field. And for a Colts team the last couple of years that has finished a game, 2 games away from the playoffs, he might be able to get them in the playoffs at 9 wins and not have a great season, and then put the Colts in this really tough spot where they give him this big extension when he probably didn't deserve it, and it hurts them more in the long term. So I definitely see what you're saying here. There is a scenario where that is the worst case that could happen, but it's certainly in the realm of possibility. There's so many different ways this could go this year. I could see them winning 3-4 games, because look, when the quarterback situation is this dire on paper, your floor is, there is like no floor. The floor could be the basement.
I agree.
I agree, yeah. We saw the Tennessee Titans last year. I don't think the Titans are a bad roster by any means, but when their quarterback play was Will Levis making the boneheaded mistake every 5 seconds and Mason Rudolph coming in and playing like Mason Rudolph, the floor is the basement. You can get the first overall pick despite having, in my opinion, a better roster than like the Cleveland Browns, or a better roster than these other teams that were picking that high. So yeah, with this Colts team, it's hard to say what the worst case is. Like, worst case actually might be just winning 8 games. Somehow Carly's cool with that, and they get another mid-first round pick, and we keep Chris Ballard, we keep Shane Steichen, we keep Anthony Richardson. That might be the worst case, because it's just that middle of the road. But I think we're all kind of the opinion that probably doesn't happen going forward, but we'll see. I definitely don't disagree with you that could be one of the worst cases, though, that Jones comes in, puts up like a 19 touchdown, 12 turnover season, and in 16 games started or something, and they get to 9 wins and get blown out in the playoffs, and everyone's happy, and we give them this big extension. We've seen it before in the NFL. It happens. So I can't rule that out for sure.
Thank you. Ed?
Yeah, hi Zach. Thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate you taking time out. And like the others have said, I'm a big fan. Listen to you every day. Listening to you on my car journey home today, I got stuck in traffic for an hour, which was fun in the boiling English summer. I've got loads of questions, but one I kind of have been thinking about recently, and again, it's kind of off the back of the series you've been doing with Locked On with the position series, because the position group that I've been or not just me, but we have been concerned about, is the linebacker group. And after listening to your show the other day, I do feel slightly better about it now. It's slightly better about where we stand. But I'm just interested, do you see the Colts bringing anybody else in as sort of free agency, or bringing any sort of other players into the building? Not just in the linebacker room, but maybe across the roster. You know, I was looking recently, was it Jermaine Pratt when he left the Bengals? I think there's a lot of people sort of connecting the dots there and thinking that he may be a contender to come to the Colts, given our maybe lack of options in that position, and Lou Anarumo coming in as well. Do you see the Colts bringing anybody else in, or what are your thoughts around there?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at how the Colts have operated in the past under Chris Ballard, it's not outside the realm of possibility for them to bring in a guy in June, July, August. I think especially towards the end of August when the cut downs start happening, we have seen him be pretty active. And there have been players who have stuck on the roster for multiple seasons who have been waiver claims at the end of the preseason. I mean, Al-Qadim Muhammad obviously stuck on the roster for a while. Kenny Moore back in the day was a waiver claim at the end of the preseason. So those guys have stuck. Isaiah Land's another one who is still on the roster. So they have added that way. And they have made some veteran moves in the past. I believe Spencer Ware was a very late signing back in 2018 for this team. At running back, they've made running back moves in particular with veteran guys later in the offseason. So I wouldn't say they're going to make anything big going forward. I just don't think they're in the situation where they're like, you know, we're a 30-year-old player on the market in June away from being a playoff team. I don't think they view things. Yeah, I don't think they view things that way. But I think if like an injury happens, they could certainly go out there and grab a name that we recognize. And that player could be someone who sticks on the roster throughout the season.
Yeah. Okay.
That segued me nicely into the next point, which is grading the off season. So draft night, you know, we was not excited because we knew who we was getting. It was just regardless of if he was going to fall to us, or I mean, we was too high for Loveland, I thought. So thank you. Was it Chicago who took him in the end? How have you graded this off season from the film study side of things, the analyst side of things? Did Chris Ballard work his usual magic, or has he just papered the cracks?
Yeah, I think it's one of his better off seasons in the past couple of years. You know, he was very candid and upfront about his failures in the 2024 off season, on how he wasn't able to close the deal on some of the moves they were trying to make. I mean, Xavier McKinney was a safety they were trying to sign. Daniil Hunter was a pass rusher they were trying to sign. They didn't get it done there. They ran it back with the same team, and they had a worse result this past season. And Chris Ballard was very upfront about that. They didn't add any starters in free agency going into last season, and it hurt them. A lot of guys got complacent, and they didn't have the depth or just the new, fresh competition to push players on the roster. And I like that he didn't completely change his approach in the free agency period, because I do agree that his overall approach is typically the better approach. You want to draft, develop, extend, and then fill a little bit of the needs here in free agency. My only problem with him in the past was that he was too rigid with drafting and developing when guys clearly weren't the answer on this team, and they kept those guys going instead of trying to fill those holes in free agency and being a little too passive. So this offseason, we saw them be aggressive with the secondary when the secondary was a big issue last year. They went out there, I mean, not even just talking about free agency, they went out there and got Lou Anarumo, multiple high-level defensive back coaches, and Jerome Henderson and Chris Hewitt, two coaches who were really well-respected around the league. And then they go get Charvarius Ward and Cameron Bynum. And I thought that was like the offseason they really needed, just to up the level of play in the secondary, get the competition better, and just add better talent to that secondary. And Charvarius Ward's a legit number one corner when healthy, and Cameron Bynum is an ascending young player that they got on a pretty good deal. So just from that perspective, I thought it was really good. I could nitpick some of the offseason and say, like, yeah, let's get a couple more lower end free agents in here to compete. But overall, again, you're keeping that draft and develop mindset, but adding more talent to your team. And then we look at the draft. Obviously, you're looking at Tyler Warren, the perfect fit for everything they needed. I do think they played it a little bit risky by not really doing anything at tight end until the draft, but it ended up paying off because they got their guy at 15. And then they added some pretty solid pieces in JT Tuimoloau and Justin Wally on day 2. I really like those. Jalen Travis, I think, can be their future starter at right tackle as well. So overall, I think it's a pretty good offseason. My only complaint really is, this roster looks pretty solid on paper, but the quarterback position is going to make or break everything. And I don't know if they got better at quarterback. And it's one of the worst rooms in the league right now, this quarterback room, because of Anthony Richardson's struggle staying healthy and being consistent the last couple of years. And Daniel Jones was cut halfway through last year. So it is hard to be optimistic about this quarterback room, even if we're looking at every other position group and saying, like, there's reason to be optimistic and there's reason to be excited. It's just the most important one is still not looking great. But I don't really know what he could have done about the quarterback position. You kind of make your own bed when you take a top 5 pick quarterback. And outside of trading for Geno Smith or signing Sam Darnold, which who knows how much that changes the entire offseason for them if they do that, I don't know if there was really that solution there at quarterback. So, for as good as you could have done in an offseason where you didn't fix the quarterback position, I think this was a pretty good offseason for the Colts.
Okay. There is one rule that I have, and that is we love a third string quarterback, and they will leave it. I was a big fan of. I say a big fan. I just like riding the underdog, to be honest. So Sammy Erlinger before he went, and now Riley Leonard's my new favourite quarterback. And also, just before I let you move on, we do have a Lord and Saviour, and that is the tight end Jack Doyle. Everything runs through Jack Doyle.
We all love Jack Doyle. Yeah, Jack Doyle's the best, man.
Absolute cult hero. But I'll let the lads ask questions now before I start talking about other great players.
Sorry, Harrison, you cut out there, mate.
It's all right. You got any more questions?
Yeah, I'll definitely take a question here. So Justin Wally, I agree, Zach. I was pretty stoked when I saw the name come up, and weirdly, some people maybe think we've been paid to praise you so much, but we haven't been. I went kind of like straight to oh, wonder what Zach said about this. I think we've got a pretty good young player on our hands. What's your evaluation of Wally?
Yeah, when the Colts made the hiring of Lou Anarumo official, the one thing I had a big concern was the speed at the cornerback position. Because when you look at Anarumo's past, he liked size and speed at outside corner, and the Colts really didn't have that on the roster. Now, they signed Charvarius Ward. That's one step there. But then it was, Jalen Jones versus Juju Brents as the other outside corner. Sam Womack factors in, but none of them really fit that archetype of what Lou Anarumo likes at outside corner. None of those guys are the Eli Apples, the Cam Taylor-Britts, the DJ Turners that he had with the Bengals, or even going back, Xavier Howard with the Dolphins. He has had that kind of type of big playmakers on the outside, and I just didn't see that with this Colts team. And then you look at Justin Wally, a player who a lot of us didn't really have on our radar come draft day. He was a player where a lot of Colts fans were like, what? Like, what are they doing here? But just from a measurable standpoint, I think he checks a lot of the boxes. Long arms, productive player. The Colts really valued 4-year guys in college, I think, in this draft. Obviously you had your players like Tuimoloau and Warren who are a little bit younger, but after those first couple of picks, they really like these guys who started early and often in college. And Wally was out there in the Big Ten, starting in 2021, starting in 2022. I have clips of him playing against Keon Coleman when Keon Coleman was at Michigan State prior to his transfer to Florida State. So he was getting big time reps early on in college, and he was playing pretty well in that role. A very aggressive, playmaking outside corner. I think there are some things he needs to get better at, but overall, if you're going to bet on someone at the top 100, I think this is the type of guy you bet on. He's a guy who coaches really raved about. I talked to a few guys in the scouting community that I'm close with, and yeah, a lot of guys who follow college football and the scouting community are really big on this guy. I think Daniel Jeremiah had a top 80 grade on him or a top 90 grade on him as well. So I think this is a guy who makes a lot of sense. I think this can be Anarumo's Cam Taylor-Britt here in Indy, and that's exactly what he needed in his system. Just another corner that can that is big, is feisty, and can run. They really lack that next level speed at outside corner, and adding Ward and Wally this offseason gives that speed element while you still bring in a guy like Jalen Jones, who is a reliable zone corner on the outside as well. So it was definitely a pick that it made me scratch my head a little bit when they made it. But I did think that corner was really up in the air in the draft because I knew that Anarumo wouldn't love the type of guys they had in that corner room. So getting a guy like Wally just gives him so much more flexibility, especially when he wants to play a lot of dime and big nickel this offseason or this next season. So I think getting a guy like Wally in there just helps what he wants to do this next season and going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Ed?
Yeah, no, same sort of question, but more around, I'm not going to try and say his name because I trip over the most simple names. But if I say JTT, you know who I'm referring to. So first of all, has he signed his contract yet? Because I know there was a little bit of not debate, but there was a bit in the post that he hadn't signed his contract, or there was a couple of I don't know if you know, or if there's any sort of movement on that.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if he has signed it. I don't really get too concerned about that. I mean, obviously, if it were to be like the Shamar Stewart thing in Cincinnati, then we would get some concerns. But for the most part, my understanding is when you get to like that mid-first to mid-second round range, there are a lot of ranges where the bonuses can be. So those take a little bit more time to negotiate. Pretty standard practice, though. I wouldn't. I mean, if he hasn't signed it by now, I think he will by the end of pretty soon here. I'd be shocked if he doesn't. Okay. Shamar Stewart's a rare situation.
Yeah, I think 100%. No, it was just interesting. I mean, that was part one. The second part, what sort of role do you think he could play this year? Obviously everyone's hoping that Latu will take a big step forward in his second year, but there's definitely room for. I mean, you can never have enough. Enough pass rush, can you? So, I mean, what sort of role do you think he could play this year? Or do you think it's going to be sort of ease him in, or do you think he could be somebody that we see quite a lot of this year?
Yeah, I think you're setting me up well here because I wrote about him the other day. It was something where I really sat down and was like, I could see so much mobility in terms of where he's going to be on the roster this year. He could be anywhere from a starter alongside Laiatu Latu, or he could be outside the rotation just because he is a 21-year-old, 22-year-old pass rusher. With a defensive staff that traditionally has not played young pass rushers. In Lou Anarumo's time with the Bengals, they spent 2 top 100 picks on defensive ends. Neither of those guys hit 40% of available snaps played in their rookie season. And again, that's a different situation. Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson were both there, very established guys that Anarumo has much affinity for. But I do think that it can be a little bit indicative that Anarumo prefers some veterans, and he's got a lot of veterans in this room, in Taekwon Lewis, in Samson Ebukam, in Kwity Paye even, who's been there, done that now for 4 years. And Laiatu Latu is a player he was really high on in last draft that, he's now working with the Colts. So I could see so many different ranges that like there's one avenue where maybe Anarumo's trying to do some of that NASCAR package stuff that Gus Bradley did and pushing a defensive end to the interior on pass rushing downs. And really the best guy on the roster for that is Tuimoloau to be that player they move in at 3-tech. But if they don't do that, there are some snaps that are going to be taken away from him potentially having this season. I think long-term he's going to be a big factor going forward. Him and Latu are the only 2 defensive ends under contract post this season as of right now. So we'll see if that factors into playing him a bit more. But regardless of what this rookie season looks like for him, I think that there is a lot of good upside in the future. He's got those long arms, big physical player, excellent run defender, and a player that can finish sacks in the backfield and has the ability to disengage late, which I think Latu actually struggled with a little bit last year. So regardless of what they do at defensive end this year or going forward, I think he's going to play a big factor, but so much of what his play looks like this year is going to come down to, 1, how ready he is in camp, and 2, what Ebukam looks like post Achilles injury, what Taekwon Lewis looks like post down season last year, Kwity Paye if he makes a jump, or if he just looks like what we've seen on his rookie contract, which is a fine football player, but it's not, that next level star for your team. So there is so many moving parts at defensive end. I'm truly fascinated by what the defensive end rotation is going to look like for the Colts this year, because you could spin it in so many ways. I would even throw Isaiah Land in there. I think he's an interesting young player that could factor into that rotation. There's so many different guys I could see getting good snaps, but so many guys I could see like falling out of the rotation or missing the roster entirely.
Yeah. So to touch on that, in your recent Locked On episode, you described it as a battleground mini camp coming up. There's lots of positions up for grab, lots of competition, which is good, which we've not had in Indianapolis for quite a long time, I'd say.
Yeah.
Is there any surprise losers that you could see coming out of this?
Yeah, there's a couple surprise losers. I think, if we're going for like minor like losers, I think like a player like Khalil Herbert isn't guaranteed a spot at running back. Tyler Goodson's a player they really like, especially for special teams. And with Giddens probably being RB2, there could be a scenario where Herbert misses out on the roster. Blake Freeland's another name that could be a surprise loser that just misses the roster entirely because they've given a couple years to that project. They've already invested in another backup tackle. Who knows if that means that he could be off the roster entirely. You can go to some other ones. I mean, some starters, surprise losers. I mean, we've talked about how Tanner Bordellini's kind of in a competition with Danny Pinter. Yeah. And while we think Bordellini's going to win that battle, I'd be shocked if he doesn't. I do think Pinter's closer in that battle than what many of us expected, just because he is that veteran player. And one point I put out there on the episode that you guys are talking about is that, Pinter made a start over Bordellini when Bordellini was healthy last year against the Denver Broncos. And now Pinter wasn't great in that game, and I would point to that as being a reason why Bordellini probably should be the guy. But Pinter did make a start over a healthy Bordellini. So I do think there is some credence to the Colts liking Danny Pinter and giving him a shot there. And then you can look at some other guys. Like I think Juju Brent's, his roster spot is up in the air going into this offseason just because he doesn't really fit the Anarumo style and he just hasn't been healthy. And you're looking at the other players where like the bottom of the roster, if it comes down to a Sam Womack or a Juju Brents, who have I seen better play from in recent years between those two guys? And honestly, like Sam Womack intrigues me more at this point. So I think there are certainly a few guys who could find themselves on the outs. Adetomiwa Adebore, I think, could be anywhere from a 40% snap guy on defense this year to a roster cut. I just don't know how they're going to fit into this Lou Anarumo system. So competition's great. I love that they are pushing these guys in training camp instead of just guaranteeing everybody their starting job like they did last year. But we could see some really surprising moves from this team just because so much is up in the air with new coaching staff and kind of with a lot of people on their last legs here in Indianapolis.
Nathan?
Ed, I'm sorry if I beat you to this, guy. I as soon as we moved on to minicamp, I wrote it down like so fast. Zach, what's your opinion on AD Mitchell? We like, on the team here, we've kind of been a fan of his, almost like tried to defend a lot of the bad that we saw. I think, his route running looks fantastic. I just think it kind of stops there. The fantastic stops there, maybe.
Yeah.
Although I'm hearing a lot, with what I'm reading with Mitchell. What are you hearing, and what are your thoughts on young Mitchell?
Yeah, I think he's the most divisive player on the roster aside from Anthony Richardson, just in the sense where a lot of Colts fans are way out on him. Trust me, I see on our podcast feed and just comments on our shows that like AD Mitchell's a bust. They should cut him and get him off the team. But then when you look around the league at like fantasy football guys or guys who do like advanced stats and do like the separation numbers and all that, it's like always being held back by the Colts. And he's this great player that the Colts' bad quarterback situation's hurting. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle where he's a young player who made his mistakes last year. Did the Colts hold him back a little bit with the bad quarterback play last year? Yeah, certainly. I mean, when you have quarterbacks completing 50-something% of your passes last year, yes, certainly some of that's going to affect the wide receiver and AD Mitchell, especially last year. But do I think he's some superstar right now? No, I don't think he's there. I think the route running is fantastic. I think when he's able to get a clean release off the line, his release game is really good. And I think the Colts found a really good role last year in isolating him one-on-one with really any corner. It could be a star corner. It could be, me playing corner, like whoever it is, he's going to separate against that guy. They would isolate him against those backup corners, but they would also isolate him against, Christian Bedford from the Bills. They would isolate him against Derek Stingley last year on the backside, and he won a lot of those reps. It's just when the ball arrived, was he winning at the catch point? And that was where a lot of the issues came. There were certainly some misses from the quarterbacks, but he had 0 contested catches last season, 0 for 5 in contested catch situations. He had, I think, the second highest drop rate among receivers with over 40 targets in the NFL last year, which he didn't have any drops in college. So I think a lot of it just was mental with him. A lot of it was him being a 21, 22-year-old wide receiver who just looked like a freshman playing against varsity kids, looked like a 15-year-old in high school playing against 18-year-old starters. Just the physicality got to him, and he just didn't look mentally ready on Sundays, even though physically he is just so talented. I think long-term, there's some positive there. I kind of view him similarly to how I viewed Anthony Richardson after Richardson's first season in the NFL, where it's like, you've got all the hard parts down, man. Let's get the easy parts down. You know how to release off the line. You know how to get open. Just catch the football. Let's be physical. Let's be a dog out there on the field. It hasn't gone perfect for Richardson, but I do have hope for A.D. Mitchell going forward. So I don't think he should be a starter for the team this year, because the Colts do have 3 receivers who I think have earned their starting jobs. But I certainly want to see him on the field this year. I want to see him get those situational snaps. And I want to see a better A.D. Mitchell, just in terms of, we know what you can do as a route runner. Let's go win some contested catches. Let's create after the catch a little bit more. Let's, keep that drop rate below 10% instead of, I think it was like 18% last year. Let's get that a little bit lower. And I think we can see a really good A.D. Mitchell by year 3 or 4, when potentially an Alec Pierce and or Michael Pittman Jr. are no longer on the team.
Sweet. Ed?
No, I've just got the big battle that I know, Zach, you're a massive fan of listening to, the kicker battle that's going on at the moment. No, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. No, I'm joking. I'm happy to move on, Harrison, because I think we could sit here all day talking about the various different battles and stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to. Sorry, Zach, I just had to get that one in.
I've built my brand brick by brick, and part of that is my dislike of kickers. It is very funny being in this market as my dislike, because if I was in this market back in 2005, I think everyone would have embraced my hatred of kickers. You guys in Colts Nation, all I hated kickers until Vinatieri came around. Then Vinatieri came around, you all started liking kickers. I should have jumped in here in like 2005 when I was like 8 years old, and I could have had a great brand in this market. But no, now I'm the antagonist to this market with my kicker.
Nah, not at all. There, no. It's only because it's the only position I feel confident I'd be able to do is go on and kick the ball.
I will say this: I hate kickers. There's no chance I could do what they do. They are still great NFL players. I can't do that stuff. I just call them out from my home on my couch. That's when I call them out. Yeah. No, I'm joking. I'm happy to move on. I just had to chuck that in.
Oh, yeah. So, moving on then, it's still a long way away. The season ahead. For me, it's obvious it's 17-9 and Super Bowl.
Oh, obviously. Yeah.
Obviously. Otherwise, why are you supporting the team? But you said there is no flaw. The Colts, apart from when there's an extremely good quarterback around, don't tend to tank. So I'm sort of asking, what do you think the record is going to be? But do you think, what's realistically the record and what's your Homer record?
Yeah, I do think when it comes to this team, when you have a quarterback room like this, I don't think there's a floor. I truly think the floor could be anywhere from 2 wins to 3 wins, whatever it is. When you have a quarterback situation like this, especially with the injury history of these two guys, this is not being talked about enough, I don't think, with Jones and Richardson. And you said, Riley Leonard is a guy that you're pulling for. I've been saying on Locked On Colts the last couple episodes, I think there's a good chance he starts a game this year purely because the
agreed.
injury history of Jones and Richardson. These guys do not finish seasons. They don't start and finish seasons.
That'll be one win then, guaranteed.
Yeah, so I could totally see Leonard starting a game this year. But I think when you factor that in, the floor is certainly going to be scary. But to Chris Ballard's credit, I don't think he's a bad general manager. Much to what a lot of people say, he's a horrible general manager, fire him. He's clearly not that bad because their worst season, their only really awful season under him, even with all this quarterback drama, is the one where the owner stepped in and fired his coach halfway through the year. If Frank Reich coaches that whole year, they finished like 7 or 8 wins. Jeff Saturday is the reason why they lost all the games down the stretch. They were an awful football team, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, with the coaches that Ballard's hired, with the rosters he's put together, they're typically not a tanking type team because he knows how to find some talent and they know how to grind out some wins on Sundays. So realistically, even with this quarterback situation, I would say their win total is probably somewhere in that 7 to 8 win range. Now, if I'm being a homer and let's say Richardson figures it out, or maybe just Daniel Jones being a little bit more consistent is the difference between a couple wins and losses, I could see them being a 9 to 10 win team. Now, even in my most homer viewpoint, they're not winning a playoff game with this team and with this quarterback situation outside of playing against a team with an injury in the first round at quarterback. But I could see them sneaking in. There's 7 teams that make it at this point in the NFL. The Colts, I think by December this year, I think their defense is going to be like a top 15 unit. And I think their offense, if they just don't turn the ball over and stay healthy, I think they can be good enough to support a top 15 unit on defense with Lou Anarumo, Charvarius Ward, DeForest Buckner, all these guys that they have. So, yeah, I think honestly like 6 to 10 wins. I know every single podcaster would say that about their team that isn't like the Chiefs or something, would say 6 to 10 wins is probably where they have their team. But, 6 to 7 is probably likely, or 6, 7, 8 is probably likely. But, I could see a world where they win 9 to 10 games. They were almost there with Gardner Minshew. They almost won 10 games with Gardner Minshew a couple years ago. And Gardner Minshew's backups. Where is he a backup now? Is he back with the Chiefs now? I think he's with the Chiefs.
Yeah, he's on the Chiefs, yeah.
Yeah, so, I could totally see them being like a last playoff team that gets in. I don't know if it's much higher than that, though, because you're just so limited by what they have there at quarterback.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm really glad you said that, because one of the questions I actually had written down here was I've gone on record, well, we all have really, to be fair, gone on record and said this on our show, and I've also written an article about it for another publication I'm involved with, saying that if the Colts can get anything above average quarterback play this year, they will make the playoffs and could even win the division. The rest of that roster is good enough to support it. The AFC South, and we've said this, and it's not disrespectful, although it sounds disrespectful, there's no juggernaut in the AFC South. You're not contending with a Buffalo Bills or a Baltimore or a Kansas City. The Texans have won the division the last couple of years, but they're not a juggernaut. They're a good side, but they're not a team that you fear particularly. So, thank you for I'd put on here, am I being objective or too emotional in what I'd said there about, and it's good to hear that, similar sort of thought process. The roster is good, and if we can get some above average quarterback play, this is a team that can get in the postseason. I agree. I think we'll probably struggle beyond that, but you got to be in it to win it.
Yeah, and the 2 times that Chris Ballard's had above average quarterback play in Indy, they were legit playoff. They won a playoff game in 2018. In 2020, they took the 2-seeded Bills to the wire in that game, and they were a couple boneheaded plays away from winning that game against Josh Allen and the Bills, being the only 7 seed to ever beat a 2 seed in the playoffs. So I do think this roster is pretty solid, and I think that they can be a playoff team with above average quarterback play, but I feel like we're asking for a lot with that at this point. And, I say all this because we haven't really even talked about Richardson much on this episode right now, because I think all Colts fans are kind of in the same boat with him at this point, where it's like, yes, we understood this was going to be a project, and he was a big time talent, super athletic player, but through 2 years, you have to show some progress. You really have to show some progress. And he hasn't been healthy enough to show that progress. And even when he's been on the field, this last year was a step back for him. So it's hard to sit here and say like he's going to magically figure it out in year 3. Maybe he shows progress this year, but even if he does show progress, I don't know if the jump can be big enough to be above average for him, because that would be a pretty massive jump over where he was last year. There were some moments last year. Like there was, I mean, I thought the Jets game was fantastic. I thought the Houston game to start the year was pretty solid. I even think that Lions game where everything went wrong because everybody dropped everything and there were a bunch of penalties that took away multiple big plays. I thought that was a pretty positive showing from him. But the way the year ended with some duds late in the year against the Broncos and the Titans, and then the back injury, it's hard to get your hopes up about Richardson at this point. And then Daniel Jones, again, this is a quarterback that was cut halfway through last season. It's hard to get your hopes up there. So it's tough to see the Colts getting that above average quarterback play this year, even if we all agree that, like, if they do get it, they can probably be a playoff team. It's just, I'm not sure these two guys on the roster are capable of getting there in 2025. Maybe in the future, Richardson can somehow get there. He's still a really young player, but he's got to take some sort of like forward step, and he hasn't been able to do that yet in the NFL.
No, agreed.
Nathan?
Yeah, I'm gonna tee you up, Zach, with this one, right? So I'm not going to disagree with anything anyone said. I think there is definitely a world where, where a 3-win team, even a 2-win team, as you said. So if we clean house, who are you picking a quarterback in the draft next year if Arch doesn't declare?
Yeah, I don't think Arch would declare, just because the only guys we see that are like top guys who go back are the guys who are either know they're going to be first overall picks regardless, like Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning, or the guys who's got daddy's money. And he's got daddy's money. He's got that money for the rest of his life. So there's no pressing need to go in the draft a year early. Yeah. He could just enjoy college life. He's gonna be a millionaire, or probably close to a billionaire at this point with that family, for the rest of his life. So he's good, So outside of that, it's shaping up to be an interesting draft. I will say that. I think there's more intrigue in this next quarterback draft than there was in this past one, where luckily Cam Ward came on the scene late in terms of like this past year after transferring. But I think there are a couple guys that we can really look at. Like, I think a guy at Clemson, like Kate Klubnik, is a guy who, he's young. He kind of reminds me a lot of a Baker Mayfield in terms of just being a smaller passer with a rocket arm and really good mobility. He needs to take a jump. He's not really there yet, but if he does take that big jump this next season, he could be that top 5 pick that I'd be intrigued by with the Colts. There's a lot of hype for Mendoza going to Indiana, going in that very quarterback-friendly system with Indiana Hoosiers, and obviously Colts fans are all getting excited about this big arm quarterback coming there.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, he could certainly be a guy who we've seen quarterbacks transfer to a quarterback-friendly system and have that really help their draft stock. Michael Penix Jr. is a big one there. Joe Burrow, obviously, going to LSU. So I think Mendoza could be the next one there. I'm not a big fan of Drew Aller, but I think the NFL does kind of like him. I watched too much of his film last year to be excited, but he's still a young guy. He could take that big step forward. And then speaking of LSU, there's Nussmeier as well, a pretty good, accurate quarterback. And then the next Anthony Richardson over there at South Carolina, and I think it's Lenora Sellers there at South Carolina.
That's who I was hoping you were going to say. Yeah,
I don't know if I could fall for it again though, man. Fool me once, it's on me. Fool me twice, it's also on me. but I don't know. I'm intrigued, man. I'm so intrigued by Lenora Sellers. And obviously he's played more football than Richardson did at college, which is more intriguing than, Richardson was the ultimate gamble. It was all traits and no production. Sellers has some production. So just who I am as an evaluator, I'm going to prefer a player like Sellers, but I'm keeping my eye on Klubnik. I think that's the type of guy that I'm really intrigued by if he can take that step. His last month of the season last year was really good football. And I think if he can carry that into this next season, especially at Clemson where there is talent, and he can maybe, go on a deeper playoff run if they are able to put some things together, I think he can be a guy that you can really look at and again, be like another Baker Mayfield in the NFL, which is a fringe top 10 quarterback who can really help your team.
For sure. Awesome. Thanks, man.
So, Zach, we've kept you 3/4 of an hour now, so we're going to round out the show. Before we round out the show with it, I've got one last fun question for you.
Okay.
See if you guys have got any other. But have you got any questions for us?
Oh gosh, you know what? I do have one, and maybe your fans would already know this one, but how do you guys pick a team in the NFL? Like, how did you guys all come together and pick the like? For me, the whole reason I'm covering the Colts is my buddy in high school was a Colts fan, and living in Virginia, I always had to follow the Colts. I started getting into this writing thing. I wrote one article about the Colts because I knew of them because my buddy was a big fan, and it led to everything that's going on now. But how did you guys get it? Did you have a friend? Did you have a family? Was it Peyton Manning? Like, how did you guys all get into the Colts?
It's I guess for us it's slightly different, but we're all slightly similar. For me, it was Madden. It was the demo.
Oh yeah,
my favorite player at the time. I couldn't say his name at the time, but it was Joseph Adai.
yeah.
And that's where I fell in love with the Colts, and then I think I eventually got serious with the Colts when we drafted Malik Hooker.
Okay.
And I thought that was going to be something. Little did I know about football. Then I also thought Dante Moncrief was going to be something. So that's where my opinions lie.
We all have our misses. It's part of the game.
But I'm sure Ed and Nathan have their own story. They probably told me. But yeah, they can share it quickly if they want.
Yeah, mine, I'll shorten it. First ever game I watched was New York Pats Super Bowl in 2008. I stayed up very late and had a row off my parents because I was tired for school the next day. I thought I really liked this game. Fast forward to Peyton, fell in love with Peyton, genuine. I thought he was a superhero. Then in comes Captain Luck over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I signed up for a life of pain, I think. So yeah, that's me.
We all do as sports fans. That's basically life. I'm sure you guys have soccer teams and stuff out there, or other football teams. Sorry, that you guys have signed up for lives of pain with.
Oh yeah,
Britain's just as much pain, to be honest. Yeah,
Britain's
just as much pain. Do you follow soccer at all, Zach? Do you have any interest in it or not?
I love watching like the World Cup and stuff. Okay. I watched it. Oh man, it was like 2018, 2019. I was doing a lot of writing, and I would put on like the World Cup games, and I watched like I think it was Belgium who was scoring a ton of goals or something. I was like, man, this is fun. Why'd I always like discount soccer? I was like, this is fun to watch. It was like Belgium was scoring a bunch, Germany was scoring a bunch. I was like, this is great. I love it. So I did become a bit of a soccer fan, but I haven't picked like Real Madrid or any of those teams out there. I know there's some fights out there with a lot of those teams.
Yeah, I remember on the World Cup, the last World Cup in Qatar, I remember England got knocked out by France, and I was gutted. And about 2 days later, the Colts went to play the Vikings and were 33 up at halftime.
That was great.
And
that was one of the funniest games ever.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't in a great mood before I watched that anyway because of England. And then I watched that. It got to even my wife felt sorry for me. She was just like, "You just don't get any luck with your teams." I was just like, I'm just going to bed. I'm just going to bed.
The Jeff Saturday era was certainly an era. That was great. That was insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't a fun week of sports for me.
No.
Yeah, that wasn't great. Just quickly before you go, just one last question. Just talking about the international sort of crossover and stuff. And obviously the Colts are going to Germany this year, which is really exciting as part of the international series. I'm just always interested. How are the international games viewed sort of stateside? Because the reason I ask, because in England they've talked about taking the Premier League overseas, and it is met with absolute sort of vitriol, like you cannot do this. You cannot take our game away from the local people. Take it out of the community. So I'm just interested from a stateside perspective, because from a selfish perspective, I love being able to go to London, and obviously the guys are lucky enough they're going to be going to Germany to watch these games. And I've taken my son to watch live American football games, which is great because he's now developed a love for the sport that maybe he wouldn't have done without that opportunity. So from a selfish perspective, it's great. But I just wonder what the view was sort of stateside and how the international games are sort of seen.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hit or miss with a lot of fans. I don't think there's any. Well, I can't say there's any. I don't think there's a ton of vitriol when it comes to like, don't send our game overseas. I think a lot of football fans want the game to grow. I think they want more people. And honestly, I'm a big fan of just the pathway program, getting international players in the NFL and getting these games over there. I do think if there's any complaint, it's more so when it comes to our individual teams and how they handle traveling in the middle of a season to another country can really throw off a lot about your team. I think they could do better with that, giving the bye week before that travel. So maybe the team can get out there, they have a week to rest and then they get out there, or maybe the bye week after, so they get out there, they play their game, and then they have a whole week to recoup when they get back, because that is a big difference going across the world to go play your sport, So I do think the NFL can handle it better, but overall, I think, I think it's been fun. I remember, what was it? The Colts Patriots one in Germany a couple years ago, where was it Isaiah McKenzie who returned it when all of the German fans were singing Country Road or whatever, Country Road bring me home.
Yeah.
That was just an awesome moment. Just seeing the international crowd who maybe before that game, they had no clue what was going on in there, or maybe halfway through the game, they had no clue what was going on, but still getting excited for the moment, finding that love of football, love of sports. For me, I'm a huge fan of growing it overseas. I just think the NFL can still find ways to be better with it. But I think it's a blast. I think it's great. I love that they're expanding. It's probably easier to do more of the Mexico City games and the Canada games, obviously, just to get, that closer travel. But if they can just find some way with the bye weeks, or maybe give those teams an extra bye week if they are doing the international games, make it an incentive to do these international games. And then there's pride and incentive, and then you still get that rest. I think that they could find a better way with it. But I don't think many fans here in the States are upset about the game growing. I mean, we know it's one of the bigger games in the world, and that's with it being a mostly American product. It's all the teams are in America, so maybe one day we get a team out there in Europe or something. That'd be cool. That'd be great. The travel would just be a bit of an issue, but aside from that, I think it would be fun. I'm always jealous when it comes to football or soccer. It's just how big that game is worldwide. And even other sports like hockey, and I'm a huge hockey fan, hockey being so global, baseball being very global. American football is very just American football. We get these really small leagues across the world, but we don't really get many NFL players coming from other countries. So we can grow that game and get it to where it's like the NBA, where we're seeing dudes from France getting drafted in the first round who don't play a lick of ball in the States. I think that would be great. Just get more people involved in this sport and get more podcasts like you guys from the UK that are big Colts. But I think that's such a great thing for the sport, man.
Yeah. So, I agree. Thank you.
Just want to again appreciate you for your time, but I have got one last question, and I am going to put you on the spot a bit. So I'll give you some time to think. So over here, for a laugh, we like to play five-a-side soccer, which I guess is probably flag football equivalently. So I'm going to ask you to choose 5 players, Colts all time. I've got a list for you. So you need to choose a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, a tight end, and a defensive player. And then I will ask you for a head coach. But then 5 players, I need your five-a-side ultimate Colts team.
Okay, so we're doing this is a flag football 5-a-side.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have Peyton Manning. That's the easy one. Yeah. We love Andrew Luck to death. We love him. He's great. But we have to have Peyton Manning on our flag football team here, especially because he's not running in the flag football game. It's perfect for Peyton Manning. If we were going for more two-way stuff, then we can get Andrew Luck out there. But I think Peyton's great for it. Running back, it's tough because they've had so many guys with those really little stints with the Colts. Like Marshall Faulk and Edgerrin James. Joseph Adai was fantastic here. I think you have to go with Faulk just because he was such a dynamic player. And I think also for flag football, just the pass catching would be dynamic for it. So you have to go with him there. Receiver's easy because you get, did you say 2 receivers or 1 receiver for me?
Just 1 receiver.
1. So for me, Marvin Harrison was by far and away better than Reggie Wayne. I think Reggie Wayne's fantastic. He's more of a Indianapolis legend just because of his work with the team post-playing career and just the love that people have for him. But Marvin Harrison's like a top 5 receiver to ever play the game for me. Like, you have to have him in there. Tight end, oh man, Dallas Clark, just that speed. That speed at tight end is just otherworldly. I know I'm picking a lot of Indianapolis people. That's a huge debate, the Indianapolis versus Baltimore era of Colts, but I mostly stick with the Indianapolis era. You got to go Dallas Clark. You got to stick with just that era of Colts football. And then defense, it's, man, you get so many different dudes here for defense, because if we're talking flag football, right, you want a playmaker. You want a guy who's going to go out there and make some plays on both sides of the ball. Let's go more modern and go like a Kenny Moore. Like, I think a Kenny Moore with just his hands and his ability to climb the ladder. I think, and he, fun, especially because look, if we're doing these guys playing both ways, Peyton on defense is going to be a liability. We need to get Kenny Moore out there to cover for him. So I think we need someone to cover up that liability there. We're going to have Kenny Moore out there, but there's so many good defenders, obviously, that could play on this team. You can go Kenny. You can go back to, Butler and all them, and that's in the secondary. A lot of fun players. Vontae Davis, rest in peace, a fantastic player in his time with the Colts. Like, this team has a fun, rich history just since 2000, honestly, and before that, if you count Baltimore, obviously too. So really fun team to cover. Really great organization. Excited for everything going forward too with them. But having that early 2000s era of Peyton and Marshall Faulk, obviously early, but then Edgerrin James, Marvin Harrison, Dallas Clark. I mean, you guys were all spoiled back then. That's what it was. I mean, I know you guys kind of missed it a little bit, but for people who were like, grew up in the 90s Colts fans and into the 2000s, like, gosh, how spoiled can you be with Peyton Manning coming to town?
Love it.
Like I say, again, appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
I know the guys appreciate it as well. And Nathan, anything else before we go?
No, just a massive thank you. This has been a great episode, and I hope you've enjoyed speaking to 3 people from the UK too. But yeah, thank you, dude. Appreciate your time.
Of course, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks, Zach. Really appreciate having you on. Been great talking to you.
Yeah, you guys too.
So.
Thanks.
We've been Southbound. Our guest has been Zach Hicks. You can find him on X at Zach Hicks 2, and also with Jake Arthur on the Locked On Colts. Make that your first listen of the day. And joining us after, well, we've predicted it now, so I'm locking it in. I'm saying Zach locked it and predicted it that Riley Leonard will be playing against Gardner Minshew in the conference championship.
Certainly could happen. You can't even rule it out at this point.
Brilliant.